Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a music chat about the best ever bad review, a real trashing, a masterpiece of the literary art. And of course, it's not by me, it's by Bernard Shaw. It's his review of Hubert Parry's oratorio, Job. And since I just did a video on Vaughan Williams' Job, I figured while I'm in a Job mood, we should do another Job. Now, this is fascinating. I don't know if any of you are interested in critical shop talk, but I, being a critic, am sort of a student of criticism, and I tremendously enjoy reading other criticism and historical criticism. And of course, no one was a greater writer than George Bernard Shaw. He was not, in my view, a particularly good music critic. In other words, he was very limited in what he liked musically, but that doesn't make any difference because his criticism is a literary masterpiece, which at the end of the day, when we're all dead and gone, is all criticism can be, because the musical judgments that it renders are going to be largely irrelevant. Mine, his, anyone else's. Anyway, this is possibly the best bomb I have ever read in my life. It is extraordinary. It is lengthy. And I'm just going to read the whole thing to you because, you really have to hear it out loud. It's not the same thing when the words are just sitting on the page. And so if the idea of me sitting here reading something to you, freaks you out or bores you to tears just from the anticipation of the event, by all means, skip this video and move on to another one. I understand, but you're going to really, really be missing something special. So let us get right to it. The title is A Bad Oratorio, and here we go. Ahem. Yes. For some time past, I have been carefully dodging Dr. Hubert Parry's Job. I had presentiments about it from the first. I foresaw that all the other critics would cleverly imply that they thought it the greatest oratorio of ancient or modern times, that Handel is rebuked, Mendelssohn eclipsed, and the rest nowhere. And I was right. They did. The future historian of music studying the English papers of 1892-93 will learn that these years produced two entire and perfect chrysolites, Job and Falstaff, especially Job. I was so afraid of being unable to concur unreservedly in the verdict that I lay low and stopped my ears. The first step was to avoid the Gloucester Festival. That gave me no trouble. Nothing is easier than not to go to Gloucester. I am, to tell the truth, not very fond of festivals. It is not that the oratorios bore me, or even the new works composed expressly, the word expressly here indicating the extra special dullness supposed to be proper to such solemn occasions. These things are the inevitable hardships of my profession. I face them as the soldier faces fire, feeling that it is the heroic endurance of them that raises criticism from a mere trade to a profession or calling. But a man is expected to have the courage of his own profession only. The soldier must face cold steel, but he may, without derogation, be afraid of ghosts. The doctor who braves fever may blench from shipwreck, and the clergyman who wars daily against the prince of darkness is permitted to quit a field in which he unexpectedly meets a mad bull. The musical critic is ready at duty's call to stand up fearlessly to oratorios, miscellaneous concerts, requiems, and comic operas, but it is no part of his bargain to put up with the stewards at a provincial festival. It is not that these gentlemen intend to be uncivil or are by nature more evilly disposed than their fellow creatures, but they have no manners, no savoir-vivre. They are unsocially afraid of the public, snobbishly afraid of being mistaken for professional attendants, unaccustomed to their work, which requires either experience or tact and self-possession. and inflated with a sense of their importance instead of sobered by a sense of their responsibility. Consequently, they are fussy, suspicious, rude, or nervous, as the case may be, constantly referring helplessly to the one or two of their number who have their wits about them, and not unfrequently blundering unintentionally to within a perilous distance of the point at which the more choleric and muscular sort of visitor will threaten violence and execute profanity, and the more subtly malicious will patronizingly offer the blunderer a tip. By good luck, I have never myself been outraged by a festival steward, but the mere flavor of irresponsible and incompetent officialism poisons the artistic atmosphere for me. It brings before me the appalling centralization of English intellectual and artistic life, and therefore of social grace, with the consequent boorification of the provinces. It will never be merry England until every man who goes down from London to a festival or other provincial function will frankly say to his host, "My friend, your house is uncommonly comfortable and your grub of the best. You are hospitable, and you gratify my vanity by treating me, who am a nobody at home, as a somebody from London. You are not bad company when you go out into the fields to kill something. But owing to the fact that you have been brought up in a town where the theater, the picture gallery, and the orchestra count for nothing, and the exchanges count for everything, you are, saving your presence, a hopelessly dull dog, and your son is growing up as dull a dog as you." Not a polite speech, maybe, but you cannot make revolutions with rosewater, and what is wanted in English provincial life is nothing short of a revolution. Such being my sentiments, it will be understood that I forewent Gloucester and Job last autumn without regret. I have explained the matter at some length, not because I have not said all the above before, but solely to put off for a while the moment when I must at last say what I think of Dr. Parry's masterpiece. For I unluckily went last Wednesday to the concert of the Middlesex Choral Union, where the first thing that happened was the appearance of Dr. Parry, amid the burst of affectionate applause which always greets him. That made me uneasy, and I was not reassured when he mounted the conductor's rostrum, which led the band into a prelude which struck me as being a serious set of footnotes to the bridal march from Lohengrin. Presently up got Mr. Bantock Pierpoint and sang, without a word of warning, "There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job," and then I knew I was in for it, and now I must do my duty. I take Job to be, on the whole, the most utter failure ever achieved by a thoroughly respect-worthy musician. There is not one bar in it that comes within 50,000 miles of the tamest line in the poem. That this is the naked, unexaggerated truth. Is anybody surprised at it? Here, on the one hand, is an ancient poem which has lived from civilization to civilization and has been translated into an English version of haunting beauty and nobility of style, offering to the musician a subject which would have taxed to the utmost the highest powers of Bach, Handel, Mozart, Beethoven, or Wagner. Here, on the other, is not Bach, nor Handel, nor Mozart, nor Beethoven, nor Wagner, not even Mendelssohn or Schumann, but Dr. Parry, an enthusiastic and popular professor, 45 years old, and therefore of ascertained powers. Now, will any reasonable person pretend that it lies within the limits of those powers to let us hear the morning stars singing together and the sons of God shouting for joy? True, it is impossible to say what a man can do until he tries. I may, before the end of the year, write a tragedy on the subject of King Lear that will efface Shakespeare's, but if I do, it will be a surprise, not perhaps to myself, but to the public. It is certain that if I took the work in hand, I should be able to turn out 5 acts about King Lear that would be, at least, grammatical, superficially coherent, and arranged in lines that would scan. And I doubt not at all that some friendly and ingenious critic would say of it, Lear is, from beginning to end, a remarkable work, and one which nobody but an English author could have written. Every page bears the stamp of George Bernard Shaw's genius, and no higher praise can be awarded to it than to say it is fully worthy of his reputation. What critic would need to be so unfriendly as to face the plain question, has the author been able for his subject? I might easily shirk that question in the case of Job. There are no end to nice little things I could point out about the workmanship shown in the score, its fine feeling, its scrupulous moderation, its entire freedom from any base element of art or character, and so on through a whole epitaph of pleasant and perfectly true irrelevancies. I might even say that Dr. Parry's setting of Job placed him infinitely above the gentleman who set to music The Man That Broke the Bank. Remember, I'm the man that broke the bank at Monte Carlo. Remember, they sing that in Lawrence of Arabia, you may recall. Parry has left his subject practically untouched, whilst his music hall rival has most exhaustively succeeded in covering his. It is the great glory of Job that he shamed the devil. Let me imitate him by telling the truth about the work as it appeared to me. Of course, I may be wrong. Even I am not infallible, at least not always. And it must be remembered that I am violently prejudiced against the professorial school, of which Dr. Parry is a distinguished member. I always said, and say still, that his much-admired oratorio Judith has absolutely no merit whatever. I allowed a certain vigor and geniality in his L'Allegro ed il Pensieroso, and a certain youthful inspiration in his Prometheus. But even these admissions I regard as concessions to the academic faction which he leans to. And I was so afraid of being further disarmed that I lived in fear of meeting him and making his acquaintance, for I noticed that the critics to whom this happens become hopelessly corrupt and say anything to please him without the least regard to public duty. Let Job, then, have the benefit of whatever suspicion may be cast on my verdict by my prepossessions against the composer's school. The first conspicuous failure in the work is Satan, who, after a feeble attempt to give himself an infernal air by getting the bassoon to announce him with a few frog-like croaks, gives up the pretense and, though a tenor and a fiend, models himself on Mendelssohn's St. Paul. He has no tact as an orator. For example, when he says, "Put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face," there is not a shade of skepticism or irony in him, and he ineptly tries to drive his point home by a melodramatic shriek on the word curse. When one thinks, I will not say of Loki or Klingsor, but of Verdi's Iago or Boito's Mephistopheles, or even of Gounod's stage devil, it is impossible to accept this pale shadow of an excitable curate as one of the poles of the great world magnet. I have to just repeat that line. It is impossible to accept this pale shadow of an excitable curate as one of the poles of the great world magnet. Oh, God, if only we could all be geniuses like Bernard Shaw as authors, right? Okay, to continue. As to Job, there is no sort of grit in him. He is abject from first to last, and is only genuinely touching when he longs to lie still and be quiet, where the wicked cease from troubling and the weary are at rest. That is the one tolerable moment in the work, and Job passes from it to relapse into dullness, not to rise into greater strength of spirit. He is much distracted by fragments of themes from the best composers coming into his head from time to time, and sometimes cutting off the thread of his discourse altogether. When he talks of mountains being removed, he flourishes on the flute in an absurdly inadequate manner, and his challenge to God, show me wherefore thou contendest with me, is too poor to be described. Not until he has given in completely and is saying his last word does it suddenly occur to him to make a hit, and then, in announcing that he repents in dust and ashes, he explodes in the most unlooked-for way on the final word ashes, which produces the effect of a sneeze. The expostulation of God with Job is given to the chorus. The voice that sometimes speaks through the mouths of babes and sucklings here speaks through the mouths of Brixton and Bayswater. And the effect it is precisely what might have been expected. It is hard to come down thus from the Heiligen Hallen of Sarastro to the suburbs. There is one stroke of humor in the work. When Job says, "The Lord gave and the Lord taketh away, blessed be the name of the Lord," a long and rueful interval after the words "taketh away" elapses before poor Job can resign himself to utter the last clause. That is the sole trace of real dramatic treatment in this dreary ramble of Dr. Parry's through the wastes of artistic error. It is the old academic story, an attempt to bedizen a dramatic poem with scraps of sonata music. Dr. Parry reads, "The walls are broken down, destroyed are the pleasant places," and it sounds beautifully to him. So it associates itself with something else that sounds beautifully, Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto, as it happens in this case, and straight away he rambles off into a rhythm suggested by the first movement of the concerto, and produces a tedious combination which has none of the charm or propriety of either poem or concerto. For the sake of relief, he drags in by the ears a piece of martial tumult. "See, upon the distant plain, a white cloud of dust, the ravagers come," compounded from the same academic prescription as the business of the dragon's teeth coming up armed men in Mackenzie's Jason. And the two pieces of music are consequently indistinguishable in my memory. In fact, I do not remember a note of either of them. I have no wish to linger over a barbarous task. In time I may forgive Dr. Parry, especially if he will write a few more essays on the great composers and confine himself to the composition of absolute music, with not more than three pedal points to the page. But at this moment I feel sore. He might have let Job alone and let me alone, for patient as we both are, there are limits to human endurance. I hope he will burn the score and throw Judith in when the blaze begins to flag. May 3rd, 1893. Now, that, my friends, is a trashing. That is marvelous. Absolutely marvelous. And it only remains to be said that Job was recorded for Hyperion in a performance led, I believe, by Hilary Davin-Whetton. I have it. It's in the overflow room. I'm not going to say whether I agree with Shaw or not about the merits of the work, but I will say this. It's out of print, and it went out of print very, very quickly. And that, my friends, is absolutely the most amazing bad review I have ever read. It's just astonishing, and I hope you've enjoyed hearing it. Any mistakes in the reading were purely of my own making. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.